Welcome to our Composable Banking Vodcast by Sili Solutions. In this vodcast, we're exploring what it takes to build future-proof financial services. In today's episode, we're joined by Mikko Ayub and Erik Åkesson from BearingPoint to discuss legacy, what it actually is, where it shows up, and why it matters now more than ever. Drawing on insights from their recent white paper, we'll look at how banks can identify their optimal rate of change, separate transformation from day-to-day operations, and take practical steps to turn legacy from a constraint into a catalyst of growth. Let's get started. Legacy problems aren't random. They're engineered into the system. Let's talk about organizational design and avoiding typical pitfalls. What's the most common pitfall you see in financial organizations?
Now, if we compare financial institutions and tech-native companies, there is a sort of legacy in the way technology and business are related to each other in financial institutions. Not all, but many. And where tech-native companies have a certain technology and they are built around that technology and they make use of that technology into making money and serving customers, then the financial institution usually has its business and its customers, and technology is then supporting in making it possible. Now, that leads to the situation that as technology is coming more and more central and focal in the financial industry, like in any other industries, and standing needs to be made in sort of what is the tail and what is the dog. Is the tail the technology and the business the dog, or is technology the dog and business the technology? And these sort of challenges or frictions or questions on the table are not really present in tech-native companies that have built around technology. Fintechs, for example, who are built around an innovation or a technology. So this is something that financial institutions, like many other organizations for that matter in other industries, need to then make a standing on a C-level, up all the way to C-level, that you know who has what responsibility, and at the end of the day, who decides what.
I think from that organizational point of view, there is one case in point right now with the AI being a little bit hyped. Then people want to develop AI use cases and they want to do it with something that is useful. And who knows what's useful? Well, the people near the business, and they have an idea. And I have seen that actually recently, sort of like half a year ago, I had a lot of discussions with frontline people that wanted to start some AI initiative.
So being agile is very important.
Yeah, exactly. And by definition, when you're agile, you have to give up a little bit of control.
Yeah. How do silos contribute to legacy issues?
I think that is a good example. On a previous episode, we were talking about the military and taking an example from there, how you really need to get all the operation under a command center and elevate the totality. And at worst in corporates, you don't only have, one legacy, but if the corporate is very siloed, you can have numerous legacies in different silos of the organization. And then at the top of the corporate, it becomes quite challenging to establish the understanding of what is our legacy. Because the answer can easily be, we have various legacies and they can even be conflicting. And for one, a positive legacy can be a negative legacy for another. So also from a legacy perspective, playing down silos in an organization is a recommendable action.
Yeah, and when it comes to sort of avoiding or how you should manage a legacy, I think there is some learnings from system architectures in tech. It is true for the technological legacy handling of these problems, but and that is kind of obvious. But you can draw some conclusions on it when you do your organizational design. I think is not so obvious. So, there's something called modular design in system architecture. It's well known, and it sort of hinges on at least 3 sort of major factors. Number 1, each module within the system should have a clearly defined person. So if you think of your system as a number of boxes, each box should have a clearly defined, this box will do the following task, or these following tasks. Now, the second thing is that this box should have very clearly defined borders. So this is what they do and what they don't. And then, as a number 3, all boxes interact with each other, and these interactions should be well understood and mapped. If your system is designed like that, you can change one module at a time. Now, if you take this thinking of clearly defined purpose, clear borders, and clearly defined interactions to your organizational design, you will be able to change a lot faster. Because typically it is not the case. It's a little bit floating, and so when you need to do some changes, and you move forward, or get rid of some legacy, or change anything, usually you have to ask at least 20 other people and say, hey, we are thinking of doing this differently now, it will be like this and that, can we take, and then the answer will typically be, as many of us that have worked in banks know, yeah, we will take it up on the agenda on the next quarterly management meeting, so see you in a quarter. But in that meeting, this and that guy were ill, and so you delay it for the next. That basically, you will drive delays like that. But if your organization is designed with the same principles in mind, as with very clearly defined borders, clear purposes, and clearly identified interactions, what you can do then, if I want to do some changes in my organizational unit, and I know exactly what it will only affect these and these other people. Well, I don't need to wait for the next management meeting then. I can just go and speak to these 2 people concerned, because I know what I do, I know what I don't do, and I know exactly what data streams goes out. Within data, you often talk about data products, because what happens is that data is consumed randomly. Typically, somebody goes to whatever departments, like payments, and say, hi, payments, I am head of money laundry controls, and I want to check for money laundry stuff. So please send me all your data on payments now. And then you do that in a rather random fashion. And then if you start to rely on these incoming streams, and then they cannot change their stuff because it is not documented how it is, the answer is data products. Data products is essentially well-defined structures that tell you exactly what data is able to be consumed, and then other units can go and consume that. So there is a web shop. These data products are available. That kind of payments data I need too. I can click there and get it. And because you then build, with using data products, a map of who consumes my data. That means that if you want to change something, you can look at that web shop and see who consumes data, and then just change as long as these few people concerned have approved. So if you do this, you will be able to move faster.
I think if we think of an organizational design or an operation that is highly important, complicated, and very integrated with other parts and other systems, I would say it's an accident waiting to happen in the organization. And it is not, you cannot remove that accident, but you can decrease the probability, and you can decrease the severity of that accident. So that is where focus should go now in this context, now talking about organizations and organizational accidents.
Why is it important to separate a legacy transformation from business as usual?
I think it is very important, and in a previous episode we discussed the military and had a takeaway from them, how they have done it. It is difficult for an individual to develop or to run business here and now in the morning, and after lunch engage in legacy management. The attention, the focus, the characteristics of those tasks differ enormously. And if these are combined for the same person and on the calendar of the individual, same individual, then we know that short-term usually always eats up long-term. And because legacy management and legacy transformation is a long-term journey, there is a high risk that it will not really advance. So I would strongly recommend separating these two tasks.
And I think another reason is that they're very different people. Not everyone should be involved in legacy management because they are simply not up for it. And that can be good and bad. Some people simply, they don't want to be in that at all. So rather than forcing them to do that and have bad results, let them continue to run the shop. And actually, sort of in every corporate, the vast majority of the people are simply running stuff and they are not developing. They can come with the odd idea here and there, and that's great. But most people will and should be engaged in running the business. I think you need to spot the kind of people that are able to drive things forward and give them time and space to develop that, sometimes even moving them full-time to something else.
And what is extremely important is that those people who are engaged in legacy management and legacy transformation do have an understanding and knowledge of the business that they are to transform. Because whatever the legacy it is to serve and to sort of support the business that is being done.
And I think that comes to one sort of, there's a parallel to another problem. There are very few people, at least in banking, that have the dual skill set of business and tech. Usually you will have people that know business and other people know tech. And the closest you get is that you have them workshop together. So they sit in a room, they have coffee and cinnamon rolls, and they talk about stuff. And they try to come up with ideas. But true magic happens when someone has that information in their one brain. So then you need people that have both, and they are very rare. And what you need to do then from a management point of view is, because you can't really buy that kind of people. And even if you buy them, they have an understanding of somebody else's problem, not yours. So you need to actually take sort of really strong frontline performers out of that duty for maybe a year or two and have them in another role. But that is often a very different job, and it is sometimes misunderstood.
How do you avoid creating new legacy while removing the old?
I would put attention into where and how new legacy is created. In an earlier episode, we talked about taking on business without understanding the full downstream engagement and processing cost of taking on new business. So in legacy management, and when sort of replacing legacy and avoiding of building new legacy, saying no to business is one of the key things that I'm not saying that it should be done, but I'm saying that it should be analyzed thoroughly. Do we want to be engaged in all these businesses, or do we see that we are just creating a future legacy challenge by going into one of these businesses? And what makes it difficult is that those businesses are typically here and now quite profitable, but are a legacy source.
What kind of leadership structure would then help, perhaps?
I think leadership needs to be committed and capable of long-term work, because legacy management is a long-term game, and you need to play long-term over short-term, at least in legacy-related issues. Of course, there are short-term tasks and answers that need to be done. For example, the company needs to be investable, so you need to keep owners and investors satisfied of the journey. But to really remove legacy is of playing it long-term and putting effort and energy in understanding legacy. One of the things is that there are not that many companies and organizations who in a strategic transformation allocate even that 10 or 15% in understanding why are we where we are today.
Structure determines speed. Design badly and you'll never move fast.